For those of you who've been with me for a little bit, I think you probably know how much I love Audible at this point. I talk about audiobooks all the time. I tend to listen to audiobooks in the morning when I work out. So the music will play. Usually I do like a workout video and there's music, but I like to listen to an audiobook with that. It kind of helps me focus a little better and remember the information and just kind of ponder it better to be doing something with my body while listening to it. Or I might like clean or make something, make some food, but have the books on where I can listen to it. And I would love more time right now to sit and read a physical book, but it's just not kind of in the plan at the moment. In the meantime, and for many years, I've had my Audible account to keep me company. I have many, many, many books that have been lifelines for me in there. And I definitely recommend that if it's something that you've been thinking about and you haven't done it yet, maybe give it a go and see what calls to you and see what wisdoms arise and what stories inspire you and what moves you. It's a really beautiful way to be able to keep the written word in your life, even if you don't have the time or space or capacity to sit and read, which I am a huge advocate for. But like I said, sometimes it's just the way that it goes for me a lot, being very ADHD. This works really well for me, I know. And I have expanded my worldview so much just by having this library, this virtual library on my little app. So if this sounds interesting to you, there is a link in the bio and a little discount code. And I wish you grand adventures. Welcome to Thought Experiment Called Life. This is where unconventional thinkers and multi-passionate makers share their journey of creating meaningful lives, built on growth, creativity, and the courage to live on their own terms. I'm Greta, a musician, a martial artist, an herbalist, and a fellow traveler through this mystery we call life. Every other Tuesday, I bring you real conversations with rule breakers and path forgers. Subscribe on Substack for more resources, mindset, tools, and more.
It was funny when we first talked, I was like, you would make a really, really cool guest. I'll ask him at some point. And then you're like, hey. And I was like, yes. I'm glad you asked me because I was going to ask you. So I thank you for wanting to come on and share your insights and your story. I found it most really interesting that you have like two like main chapters of your life, at least from what I've learned so far, where you have the skating and then the therapy. And that to me, I was like, that's really interesting. So basically what I'm doing with this podcast is I want to share people's stories who have people who live lives that are their own, right? That are to their own heart. It's part of your path. It's not what anyone what society tells us to do and all of those things. And that's fine. There's times in our life where we have to follow the norm or whatever, and that's totally cool. But I think that at least my feeling of wanting to serve and pay things forward in terms of how I live my life, people shared their stories, their journeys with me, and a lot about mental health things. And I've had depression, anxiety, and I've had autoimmune for 20 years. And all of that, I wouldn't be where I'm at and who I am if others didn't share their stories. And so this is my effort to pass that along, but not just my own stories. I want to share everyone's stories who wants to share. So yeah, thank you for being here.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and I love podcasts. I listen to a lot of them, right? And so I've always thought it'd be cool to be on one. So as soon as you mentioned you had one, I was like, let me just ask her. And
I love it.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, and I think it's really cool that you kind of investigate people's stories. I think for me, my clients kind of serve as that bit of journalism, right? Because I feel like every client I learn something from.
Yeah.
Everybody brings something unique, and I try to not limit my scope to one specific population. I do primarily work with folks with OCD and I do EMDR, but I tend to not limit my scope, and I try to see as many people as I can with obviously different backgrounds. I know obviously if there's somebody that I really feel is out of my scope, I won't, I'll refer them out. But for the most part, I like to feel as though you can grow and learn from every client. And so I do my therapy on the side, and I do they're both kind of, like you said, main projects, but They both take up kind of the equal amount of time. And so my skating I tend to do in the mornings and middle of the day, and then I come home, I see clients virtually. And then in person on Saturdays, I see clients throughout the day. So it's been a really cool balance, kind of a really cool juxtaposition of physical outlet and then mental outlet. I think they kind of balance each other out so perfectly, because being a therapist, I can somewhat be relaxed at a home setting or in a couch setting and just kind of have a nice chat with somebody. And then obviously skating is physically and emotionally demanding too. So
Something that, one of the big like motivations of who I talk to and what I talk about is the multi-passionate side of things, right? Like having that either dual or, we talk about the Triforce here at our home a lot. And like however that shows up, but having like I think it's a newer concept, or at least it's more accepted now, maybe for people to have, multi passions, multi interests that may or may not. It doesn't necessarily need to mean that everything is your primary focus or your job. It could just be like I train martial arts. I don't get paid for that. That's just a huge part of my life. I've done it forever and something I love and will always do. But the way that you have that like dual piece, like for me, it's podcasting and music. That's like how that relates. And those are my like big pieces. Here's Maynard. Hello, sir.
I love it. Oh, there's
Um,
the butt. There we
there's
go.
the butt. There's
Yep.
the butt. Here he is. So I'm curious, like, how was it finding the balance with that, with
Yeah. Well,
skating? Yeah.
and kind of piggybacking off what you were saying, I do think in contemporary society, it's more common to have this multifaceted pool of interest because, I mean, even when I think about 10 years ago, we weren't as inundated with the amount of technology, the amount of, media that we consume on a daily basis. I mean, podcasts even weren't as readily available as they
Right.
are today. And so everything, I think we're exposed to a lot of more like nuanced categories of entertainment and passion, right? And so it's
Mhm.
really interesting to kind of see that collocation. But I don't think that's a bad thing because I think it's better to be kind of a jack of all trades than a one trick pony. Obviously, it's hard to be 100% in everything. I think we kind of have to spread our energy out. Like
Mhm.
you're saying with martial arts. I mean, for skating, I don't really get paid. I've been on Team USA, but it's not like a full time job. Like we get some funding, but it's not like something that's sustainable that you can live off of. So it's more of a hobby. It's more of a passion. Whereas my
Mhm.
therapy is an actual, it's a job. Skating's a job, but less of a career, like I'm getting paid, and it's limited by the window of your physical health, right? And your age. So of course. But going back to what you said about the balance, I think it was tricky to find balance. Like when I was 19, I started pair skating. And so that's, with a partner, you're doing the overhead lifts and the fun tricks. I got a little too tall, a little too big for singles skating. So I switched over to pairs and I really enjoyed it. And at that point, I was also starting like my bachelor's in college. And I kind of made it work because I did kind of a hybrid schedule where my classes were mostly online and the rest were in person. But I managed to make it work with skating too. I was living at home with my parents, which made it easier, right, to commute to
Sure.
school, which was really close by, and then commute to the rink. So stuff like that made it work. And then when I did my master's program, that was kind of when COVID hit. And so
Okay.
kind of a weird blessing in disguise because I was able to do it all online. Obviously, not to be a reductionist because I know COVID was a really shitty time period and it sucks. But it did give me this like weird flexibility where my grad program was pretty much entirely shifted online. And so I was able to simultaneously still train my skating and, you know, do my schooling, which was really cool. And it gave me that balance. I think if I were just skating, I'd probably be, a little bit stir crazy. And I think I needed that balance. So it's been really helpful. I think a lot of people would benefit from kind of juggling some physical and some academic stuff. Yeah.
I think that's such a good point, especially with the physical and the more cerebral side of things. Like that's the biggest reason that I train the way that I do, because I train I don't know, probably at least 4 times a week, maybe 4 or 5 times a week, something like that. And it is, if I'm podcasting or if I'm doing music, I'm sitting and it's like I'm a floating head, I'm like, it's just everything's up here. And there's a certain time in the day where it's like, all right, I got to put that down and then I got to go move my body. And especially having had Lyme disease forever, I have to move my body. Otherwise, I really
Yeah.
just go downhill pretty quickly. But we talk about like whether it's COVID or whether having autoimmune or whatever, there are the silver linings. There are the things that we take from it, right? And like having learned how to kind of cycle through things a little bit has helped me tremendously. And yes, for sure, like I have to keep my ADHD in check and like give myself like, you know, discipline guidelines and things to make sure I get certain things done at a certain time and blah blah blah. But I find it to be really helpful. Like I tend to be able to bounce between things a little bit. As I'm working on one thing, I'll realize something for something else. And whether I just put those notes aside or whatever, then I can go back to what I'm doing or I switch. And sometimes that's the most effective way for me to channel what's happening in my brain. out, and then having that physical outlet keeps it balanced. So I'm not just a floating head, it's easy to get there. And I think that, like you said, I think that is something that's really important. And especially like at the level of what you're doing. And I think we should say like you're going for the Olympics, which is fucking awesome and amazing. And just really, really like, I respect the hell out of the fact that you're doing what you're doing, really, is what it comes down
Thank
to.
you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's really, I think that's when I heard about you and your story, I was like, that takes real heart. That takes real chutzpah. That takes real commitment. Like to go after something that most people like probably wouldn't give themselves permission to do, and you have. And I'm the kind of person that always wants to encourage people to give themselves that permission to do those things. I think that is something we need more of to encourage each other. Like, what do you really want to do? Like, if you could just try and do it and do it, what do you want to do? It's not always practical, but it's possible. And maybe practical is overrated sometimes.
I
It's,
think I think too in like modern society we're so inundated with practicality and what we should be doing versus what we want to do. I also think you hit on something really really niche, which is just how important, because we're so inundated with all this stuff these days. I mean, all the dopamine in the world. It's so important to be organized, I think, and
Mhm,
have a bit
mhm.
of a routine, have maybe make some lists. I mean, obviously I specialize in OCD, so list making can be a fun little
Yeah.
healthy form of OCD, but I think having that routine and organization is really key for kind of managing this multifaceted world that we're in. And yeah, I mean, I do think that more people should strive for what they want to do. I mean, we have more tools than ever now, I think, to achieve these things. So why not go all in? And yeah, I just started a new partnership with somebody and we're kind of looking at the next Olympic cycle, like 2030, right? I mean, this one my old partner and I had a falling out, so we're not in the running for this trials, but that's okay. We started a new partnership and we're kind of looking at playing around with the next cycle, seeing what that would look like. So 2030, oh God, I'll be in my 30s, but I'll be 33. But
That's
yeah,
okay.
I know.
Listen, it's okay. Our bodies are amazing. I mean, I'm 43 and I
Yeah,
fight teenagers all the time, so you could do
right,
it.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's actually kinda cool about our time period. Age is like it really is how well you take care of yourself, I think, at this point. And I don't mean that to be like, how well you take care there's obviously more factors in there, but if you are, let's say how mindful you are of taking care of yourself, like listening to your body and what you need and respecting that. Like you can stall time. I don't know, just be present
Yeah.
and yeah.
I
Like
mean, I
there's
would
so much
agree, Greta.
yeah.
I mean, you interviewed me initially at Thrive, right? Because I had this neck injury, I had a lot of weird, like nebulous symptoms. And from that, I kind of learned about mobility. I think that was a key piece of my skating career in the past. I used to have a lot of back injuries and a lot of neck problems and just tightness. And I've realized how important mobility was. And when I was probably 24, 25, I started to really kind of notice tension and tightness again. And I just started obsessively stretching. I almost turned that into a compulsion.
Yeah. I understand.
And yeah, and so I think though since then I've felt the best I've ever felt. Just focusing on that mobility, like every day when I get to the rink, I spend actually like an hour focusing on stretching and rolling out, and then I reactivate my muscles with like dynamic stuff.
Yeah.
So, but I feel like I need that, especially at 29 moving forward. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It is more of just a number in terms of how well we take care of ourselves,
Yeah.
what we're putting in our bodies, how much we're sleeping. And then I think mobility is a huge piece of that puzzle, like huge.
Yeah. Huge, huge, totally. I've done yoga all my life pretty much, probably since I was like 15 or so. And I started training martial arts when I was about 15. But, I got Lyme disease when I was 20 and I was like 80 years old during my 20s. Like I had a PICC line. I could barely like walk. I could barely get dressed. It was a mess.
Yeah.
And I was able to rehabilitate myself for the most part by the time I was 30 and get off of all of like pain medication and all the medications. And that's when I got my master's in herbalism and nutrition, but still have had, the joint pains and low back pain like tremendously. And last year, my sister who's never, she's always just, she looks like Barb. She looks like Reese Witherspoon, like in a way, right? Just gorgeous. So she starts doing Pilates and she won't stop talking about it. And I was like, "Okay, fine, whatever." So I went to go visit her in California, and I knew that we were gonna go to a Pilates class. We ended up not going, but I wanted to be, like, ready to be able just to, like, take in because I sometimes have a hard time understanding, like,
Sure.
directions. So I was like, let me just at least get an idea of what's going on. So I ended up, it's not really, it's this channel, Marie Stephan, and she does like mobility, Pilates, strength things. So there's no reformer, there's no like machine that you're using, but she was using light weights and was doing a lot of mobility exercises with some Pilates exercises. And that was in February, knock on wood. I have not had low back pain. I've had low back pain, like, and just pain in general whenever I try to like lift too many things. I haven't had it. And it taught me so much about the mobility with the strength.
Right.
It like blew my mind. I was like, this is everything. So when I talked to you about the Thrive with your neck pain and the vertigo and everything, the fact that you kept saying it was the strengthening portion of things, I was
Right.
like 100%. That is what seems to ring true. And it's so interesting because I spent most of my life just stretching, and doing martial arts. So it would be there was not that strengthening piece. It was a lot of dynamic, fast twitch muscle kind of activities, not the stretching, but the martial arts part. It really makes such a difference. And I think, what I always say, like what we like eat is the wrong word, but consume with our ears and our eyes, the things that we allow in our consciousness, and we can't keep it all out. And we do need to be aware of what's happening and take action when needed, but it doesn't need to be our 24/7 state. And I think that that's a big piece of things as well. And like being able to look at the world with glittering eyes, even after, shit happens, like be able to bring yourself back there.
Well, Greta, that's an incredible story. I mean, I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
Oh,
That fucking sucks.
It did a lot. It did a lot, but I wouldn't be who I am. It really taught me so much. It's one of those things that when I was younger, when I was in my 20s, it was harder because everybody was fine and like just living their lives and partying and doing whatever. And I was not. And I already was pretty introverted. Like I had a successful music career. So I was in a band and it seemed like everything was fine because I could get on stage and do those things. But then after that's all I had, it was like I'd perform and then I would
There's just nothing
hibernate.
left after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be like everything to that one, half an hour of performing and then nothing after that. So as I've gotten older, it's easier because I have taken care of myself. And, the people in my age group, like some of them have, and some of them are like, oh, I should stretch or like I should take my vitamins or I should, and I think what I really realized at this point is that life is a full contact sport. Everybody has a thing. Mine happened early. Everybody has something that brings you to your knees and is inviting you to crack open. And it's whether or not we take that invitation and accept it or keep hiding until it chases us down.
I think acceptance is a big piece. And I want to highlight this notion that you kind of mentioned. I grew from this. I became stronger from this. And obviously, as a therapist, I tend to not try to do that too much with clients with, complex trauma and go, well, you're stronger now. Because obviously that can be invalidating. But for a lot of people, it is nice to just hear that kind of CBT reframe of,
Yes.
yeah, but I am stronger from this experience. I did grow. What did I learn throughout that maybe decade of crap, right? And so it's really interesting when you do have these experiences that bring you to your knees. You do grow and you do build a window of tolerance. And so that can be kind of an asset in the future.
Yeah, when somebody goes, oh, but I'm like resilient and strong. But you can be both, right? Like I always
Yeah.
think about like I think it's important. It's hard to get through those shitty times if you don't acknowledge the lessons, even
Right.
if you're also like, I hate this. This was terrible. I can't believe this happened. And also like I succeeded in these areas. I think both of those, it's that whole, the multi passionate, multifaceted. Our lives are so much more intricate than we may set off to think. And I mean, this is why my podcast is called Thought Experiment Called Life, because I obviously endlessly am looking at things from different angles, going like, what's it look like from here? And what's it look like from there? Because to me, I think that that's what really makes life meaningful and beautiful and rich is when you really are able to be present with it in those moments and having lived in a body where and I had some life circumstances where it just felt very much like, I don't mean to sound this like a prison, but it was I don't have really another word to describe it. There was no path forward. So
Right.
everything, so whether it was my body or my circumstances, I did not know how to go forward. And it taught me a lot about how to find meaning within. And that is the lesson, I think, right? Like that I took forward. And it was the hardest. I don't feel like doing it again. I feel like I'm like,
course not.
hopefully I check that off, Like
Right.
if you're going through that, I'm not like, oh, isn't that great? But I am excited for people if they're going through that, because if you, embrace the suck, as they say,
Right.
something really amazing will happen and it'll be you.
No, and it's one of those yes and situations where it's like, yes, we acknowledge, we sit with, we process those emotions, but also what did I gain from it? I think
Mhm.
it's really important to sit with the suck first and let that logic come to you later. Let that like, yeah, but I did that come to
Mhm.
you later. And that's I mean, I do so I predominantly work with OCD, and one of the approaches we use, or the predominant approach we use, is exposure and response prevention, so ERP. And what that teaches clients is to we kind of allow them to invite and sit with the suck, sit with the intrusive thoughts, and obviously without performing the compulsion. That's the response prevention. So it's being able to embrace the suck and then let that logic come to you later. Let it really sifting through the crappy part first, though. And I think that's really important. And that kind of reminds me of just what you're talking about, is being able
Mhm.
to embrace it first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like for OCD for somebody? I'm curious. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's I mean, it's so granular. OCD is such a weird kind of how do I say this? It's a weird disorder because it can latch onto literally anything. I mean, there's so many subtypes, and I think the common misconception is that, you're OCD because you just like to clean or organize your
Mhm.
space. I mean, those can be tenets of OCD, but for the most part, probably just have a preference for that. And if it's not causing distress, it's fine. But we're looking at, physical and mental compulsions, intrusive thoughts. The thing with OCD is everybody in the world gets intrusive thoughts, like 95% of people, and probably the other 5% are just full of shit. But it's the meaning that we attach to them, right? And folks without OCD will get those thoughts and just dismiss them as thoughts. Folks with OCD will have those thoughts that are usually ego dystonic, meaning they're not really related to you, who you are or your values. But you get this sense of, why am I having this thought? And why am I feeling the urge to do this? And it becomes really distressing. And so with ERP, what we allow clients to do is almost invite those thoughts, lean into the anxiety, lean into the suck without performing the compulsion. And then your brain actually habituates over time by leaning into that anxiety and then realizes it's not a threat.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like the smoke alarm analogy with OCD, is that your smoke alarm is going off for burnt toast when it should be going off for real fires, right? And so people will have these thoughts, these intrusions, and their brains will flag them as super important, super dangerous, and then they'll feel that urge to do a compulsion. But the more we retrain the brain to not do the compulsion, sit with the discomfort, then the anxiety dissipates over time. So, yeah, I mean, like, and we'll usually build a hierarchy with clients of like ranking what obsessions and compulsions are the least distressing, like the more innocuous ones, and then, kind of rate them higher up to the more distressing, and then have them systematically go through maybe 1 week and just do the lower tier and then kind of move up the ladder. So, yeah, it's been a
That's
really cool journey.
Yeah. Well, my sister's a therapist. I don't know if I told you that. She's a
Mhm.
psychologist, and I have therapists and I have a lot of therapists in my life who are all like, so it's always interesting to get like everybody's specialty, like
Right.
I've never talked to anybody who's specialized in OCD. So I was like, oh, interesting. Cause it sort of reminds me of, there's one of my friends who I had on, Danielle Massey, and she does shadow work. And what I think I find the most interesting over the years of just study and learning, being a student of life, is the thing that shows up so much is, sitting with things, being able to just like
Yes.
face the shadows,
Yes.
but in a way that is allowing things to move through you. Like I had my friend on who's a mindfulness meditation teacher at Tibet House in New York. I had him on recently. He also, it's like to sit there and observe your thoughts and let them move. So there's this, side of us that really just needs to be witnessed, it sounds like,
Yes.
without just like, just look at me, please. Just look at me. You don't need to do anything. You may feel like you need to do something, but just look at me, please.
Yes, and that's something we hit on too with ERP, is kind of the observing self and then what's called non-engagement. And I think you can apply ERP to practically anything. I mean, I have folks with complex trauma that we're just allowing space to sit and observe those emotions. Because ultimately, the more you try to push away a thought or an emotion, it's gonna rebound. It's almost like, holding a beach ball underwater and trying to stuff it down.
Mhm.
It's just gonna keep coming up, and maybe with more of an effect. And so that's something we teach people, is the more we can actually lean into emotions like anxiety, then your brain learns that some of these things aren't threats. Some of these things can just be processed and observed. And then the logic that we're wanting will come to us later. That like good
Mhm.
reframe or that sense of accomplishment will come to you as a byproduct.
I love that so much. I think so I wrote a song. I actually almost named my podcast this as well. I wrote a song, like one of my first songs is Ultraviolet, called Sit With It. And it's like an electronic, it's just like a jam, but it's not it's not like a sit with it kind of. But I almost named the podcast Sit With It because that was a big practice for me as I was kind of transitioning out of my like old life. And just to, yeah, because it was shitty, and I had tried to bend myself in every single kind of pretzel you possibly could. I tried everything possible, and ultimately sitting with it would help me be able to allow something greater than my understanding to appear, because I wasn't in there trying to do it, And I think in our culture, it's like, at least I know I was raised like that. My mom was a doctor. So, like, I was raised with a female in my life who was like, you go and you do that. And I mean, she's
Right.
one of my heroes and I love it. And I'm happy that I have that. But then I had to like find a different place to channel that kind of energy in terms of mentally, right? Like, I have to get this done. I got to do this. I got to do. And this is like, stop it. Just stop it and just sit down for a second and just shut up and like surrender that need, and to allow, like, in a more spiritual context, like to allow something else to tell you what's next, or show you, or just pop into your head, and however that happens. But I think it's a really cool practice.
Yeah, and that's so adjacent to contemporary society, what we were saying, that we're so inundated with, like, dopamine and all the media and everything at our fingertips. There's this model of we need to do as much as possible. We have all the resources, so just do, do, do. And then we don't sit with things. And what's interesting too is when we have trauma and when we have adverse experiences, those pieces of us live in the limbic brain. And that part of the brain has practically no sense of rationale or time. That's why when we have triggers, for lack of a better term, our brain goes, oh my God, this is happening, right? Right. And so,
Mm.
but that part of the brain has no access to the frontal lobes, like in the sense of, processing information rationally. And so when we don't sit with emotions, when we just try to figure things out, we're actually just still engaging that limbic system. When we sit with emotions, let that limbic system naturally habituate, then that prefrontal cortex will activate and we'll get the logic, we'll get the answers that we're always looking for. And that's another thing I tell clients is before we chase logic, right? When we have a worry, the worst thing we can do is actually try to seek out an answer immediately. The best thing to do is sit with that worry, let it process a little bit, and then let the logic come to us. Albeit, obviously, there's times where maybe we really do need an answer if there's an acute medical crisis or something, sure.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
for the most part, if it's that what if, that ego dystonic worry, right, and it's probably unlikely to happen, sit with it first, let it fester a bit, and it's gonna feel crappy, it's not gonna feel great, but then the logic will come to you later.
Do you recommend that people always do this with somebody? So they have somebody to kind of if they like started getting overwhelmed with they're sitting with their thoughts, feelings?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think everybody who's practicing stuff like this should work with a therapist too. I mean, and again, my population's more OCD driven, so these are people who have constant intrusive thoughts and worries, and that's just something that we tailor their treatment plan towards. But I do think most people would benefit from sitting with worries, sitting with anxiety a little bit more, leaning into it a little bit more, and letting the logic come to you rather than immediately trying to neutralize it. So, like I said, the more we try to neutralize anxiety and try to push it away, it'll try to rebound a little bit stronger, or maybe even later in life, it'll resurface again.
I love that analogy of the beach ball, because that's, I can feel that, like,
Right.
really. I overheard a conversation the other day. I thought it was really interesting. It was a guy talking to another guy, and he was talking about how he's really trying not to have his first reaction be his action. That's kind of the summary of what I heard. And I was like, I love, because that's something that I think from doing this practice happens, right? You don't just react to things, because as you are here longer on earth, you start to realize, oh, my first reaction might just be the way that I was taught to react to something, right? Like, I know I didn't have the best models for some of the things that I would react to, and I had to like find other ways to react. But the biggest like benefit came from pausing and just being like, okay, this happened. Let me just take a beat for a second and sit with it, or just like not think about it as much. I put some music on, go for a drive, go work out, whatever. Just I will circle back to this later. And that's really helpful. I think that's definitely a sign of just being here longer on earth and maturing with like how you want to interact with the world, like who you actually want to be as opposed to just how you were taught to be, but it
And
seems like they go together.
I think some of those things that you're hitting on too are maybe actions that we can't actually perform in that moment, but we think we can. But when we have these feelings that we want to act on, maybe we really realistically can't act on them in that moment. We don't have the tools yet. We don't have, I mean, maybe this is something that we have to wait on anyways. And something I teach clients is called the mental box, where you maybe have an intrusive thought or a feeling, an urge to perform an action, and you visualize a box or a chest or whatever it is. You put that thought or emotion in it, lock it up tight, and just trust that it's in there. And then maybe later in the day, you open up that box again and go, okay, what did I put in there? And you see how relevant it is now. And it might be less sticky by that point. Usually it is. And then
Yeah,
you have more of that logic brain going, okay, here's what I can do.
I love that. That's great. That's really great. What got you interested in helping people with OCD specifically?
So I have lived experience of OCD. I struggled with it for a long time, like since I was a child pretty much, and I started with a lot of physical, external compulsions, having to do things in specific rituals or orders, and at the time, I didn't really understand what it was, and then when I was about 15, I started seeing a clinical psychologist who I was able to talk to about these issues, and we kind of developed less of an ERP approach, but more of just an approach, because I
Mhm.
wasn't one in the past, I didn't know what I was dealing with, and so we started kind of dissecting it a bit and figuring out what it was, and I saw myself doing that for people. I think to an extent, I was raised in a little bit of a bubble and my window of tolerance was a little limited. I was always the one asking questions as a kid. And I feel like the pendulum has swung the other way as an adult, where I like to be the one answering questions and helping people. And so it kind of fulfills that need for me. And so just being with my own therapist at 15 till I was maybe 20, I've been through a few, but being with a person like that just inspired me to do that. I really liked that. And I would drive to school and pretend I was in a session with a client and talk to myself. And so I just really embodied that from a young age.
I love that so much. I mean, I love my therapist. I've been with her for 12 years or so, and one of the my favorite things about her, and you do it very well too, just from us talking here, is listening, right? Like, is this just like pause in the space? And I think that if people have not either had a therapist that they really like or have not gone to therapy, sometimes they don't realize like just having somebody witness you and sit and listen to you and then just kind of reflect back to you. Like, I love my therapist. She'll just kinda listen. I'll just, whole story of my life, like, I was born here, every
Right.
detail you could possibly not even need to know. And then she'll have just like, "Have you thought about," like, "What about," like, just a little reframe, and it's great, especially for somebody like me who's just like, I do it's all of the thoughts, every single you need all of the information. Let me tell you everything.
Yeah.
And to simplify it down to, like, just a little thought that's kind of a grounding anchor, and I'm saying that for people maybe who don't know, like, therapy can show up in different ways, right? Like, my sister tends to work with neurodivergent individuals, right? So that's, like, her kind of wheelhouse, and then my other friend does mainly shadow work. I don't know if she does as a clinical psychologist anymore, but she really specializes in shadow work. So it's like you can explore and you can talk to different people who specialize in things different ways to help you look at things differently. I think that there's such a benefit to it. I know if I had stayed with my mindset that I had from, growing up and like when I got sick, like I was very angry. I was very sad. I felt very victimized by the whole thing. I was 20 years old and I was like, my life, I literally was not sure if I was going to like live. Like that's the way they were like
Right.
talking to me about it. And I was like, oh my God. And by taking the invitation of having something that really sucked, and it took many years, I was very angry for many, many years about it. And it was a physical therapist who said it to me. And then it was somebody I heard like in one of the podcasts. I've listened to podcasts, I think, since they started. I was like, they were good for helping me keep my mind buoyant, at least.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and basically the question was, what if nothing changes? How will you find your happiness, your peace, your center? Can you do that? Like that question for me changed so much because it was like an acceptance of the prison that I was in, right? Um, what if nothing changes? And this is what it is. And if I find value in my existence, then I need to find a way to make this meaningful. And that for me was really connecting on And nature's always just been, I spent a lot of time in nature. That's been like my biggest grounding piece. But finding joys in the smaller things, in the little pockets of life. And that, I don't know, that mindset shift really shifted my life. And so that was just what happened for me, right? And also Viktor Frankl talks a lot about this too, which I love his work. But I think when, when people are listening to this and they're going like, "Oh, that's interesting." I guess I just want to encourage, if there are mindset shifts that can happen for us, there's perspective shifts that can happen when we explore, and it is maybe not something that's like, and then our lives change forever and
Yeah.
fireworks, but it's a subtle, beautiful, meaningful thing that really shifts your life on a very foundational level for decades to come, and there's such beauty in that.
I think it's interesting too how you bring up Viktor Frankl because man's search for meaning is so cool in the sense that I mean it's a horrible experience that he was going through, but your equilibrium is always changing. And so how do I find meaning in the most desolate, horrific experience? And he's still able to do so, right? And so what you're saying is, well, what if I still lean into this big, what if I stay like this forever? How can I adjust, find homeostasis again, and make meaning out of that?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, it was, and for me that was what I needed to hear at that time, because I kept being angry with my situation and was like, I kept getting tests done to be like, what else? Because I had all kinds of weird symptoms that were always happening. And it was like, well, what else is wrong? Like, why can't I figure out what's wrong, And when I finally accepted that there was no test to really give me a clear answer, like that's kind of how Lyme works. You can get a Lyme test, but there's like co-infections. It can just start to attack your system in weird ways that you really can't, unless you have like, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of testing funds or whatever. But even then it's not really that helpful. And that's where I got into, like the functional side of things, which is why I love what Thrive does with the functional medicine piece of things, is because really when it comes down to something like Lyme, and this is where I ended up after just accepting what it was. I was like, it is what it is. I don't know if I'll ever be better, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat myself, because none of the doctors I talked to would take me seriously. They would be like, because Lyme, this was at least, that was a while ago, and Lyme it's still not treated well in terms of people thinking it's real or having good testing or understanding what to do with it. There's certain protocols you do if you catch it right away. And that's usually what doctors have a good protocol for, if you catch it right away. But if you've had it for a long time and it's like messing with a lot of systems in your body, like I did, that same protocol is not going to work. So you need to handle it differently. And by me just accepting that I was in this like area, I went, okay, if somebody did take me seriously and like gave a shit about what I was saying and didn't just say like, "Oh, you're depressed." I'm like, "Of course I'm depressed. I'm like 28 and can barely move, How would if I were the practitioner, how would I treat myself? How would I handle this?" And I got into plant medicine, I got into nutrition, and then really just worked like foundationally up from there and was like, let me give my body everything it needs and more. And that included not having, crappy people around. And that was kind of cleaning up that lane of things, and sleeping and having the right foods and taking ashwagandha. And in like 3 years, I was able to get off of like I said, the pain medication, and I was on Adderall just to like stay awake, and the antibiotics. And it's not the way it's going to go always for everybody, but it was what resulted. Like you said, if we're sitting with something, right? I was like, this is it. I'm sitting here with this shit. And then the logical side went, okay, well, this is where
Right,
this is where I can actually do something about this.
right,
And even if it doesn't solve it, it's good for me. It's good for
right.
me. So I'll just do that. And it ended up,
I kind of couldn't be more excited about my new sponsor, Terrapin Farms. Every Christmas for the past 3 years, I have raided their stock of aioli sauces and jams and butters and just delicious condiments for my husband. He just loves like any kind of interesting mustard or sauce. He's very creative in the kitchen, so this is like the best. It's been the best gift every year. I'll be doing it again this year, and I know he knows now at this point, but I know he's still excited for it, and I also get to benefit because it's delicious. But they have products like hot pepper bacon jam, apple maple bacon jam, blueberry bourbon pecan jam. There's a whole host of aioli sauces. There are grilling and wing sauces. There are dressings. There are dips. There are salsas. It goes on and on. And they just really have incredibly high quality products and absolutely mind-blowingly delicious things. It's one of those things that I think just makes healthy eating a little bit more exciting if you have a good sauce or condiment to go with your vegetables and your meats. These sauces really add the pizzazz that sometimes I know I am craving when I'm eating mostly a boring diet, but a very healthy boring diet. So if you are looking for something either for yourself or for somebody else, these are always great gift ideas, but also just wonderful to gift it to yourself as well. Check out terrapinridge.com and enjoy.
I still deal with things, but it's nothing compared. It's like everybody doesn't feel good sometimes. So I'm like, it's fine,
And it sounds like you found what worked for you, and I like that you emphasize. I mean, I think Western medicine tends to be so horse blindery and leave out the person-centered approach, right? And
Mhm.
so I think it's important that, I mean, Western medicine starts embracing that holism of you are an entire person, you are
Mhm.
not a diagnosis.
Mhm.
And so I think that that's where Thrive was great because, and this is my little Thrive plug of the
Yeah.
podcast,
Yeah, they do
because,
amazing work.
well, yeah, and they really sat with me and explored my anxieties because I struggled with a bit of health OCD even when I was dealing with my vertigo and my issue with my vestibular system where I had that, like, what if this never goes away? What's going on? I want answers. And they kind of helped me explore the meaning behind it, not necessarily giving me answers, because I think ultimately we always want answers. And nowadays we have all these tools. We have ChatGPT that can give us, answers are ubiquitous, but we don't always need answers. We just need to have somebody sit with us and explore the meaning behind it.
Yeah.
And I think at Thrive, they did that for me. And so I think having a team of people that can allow space for you to sit with your shit
Yeah.
and not always just give you an immediate answer, but help you find solutions and help you find things that might work but aren't guaranteed, I think is really paramount.
Especially in a situation like yours, and for the audience, so you had vertigo from a concussion, right? Yeah, from the skating accident, and I don't know if it was like a skating accident, but you fell and hit your head, right? So
It was like I fell in a jump and snapped my head back, and
Mm.
they cleared me actually from a concussion standpoint, but I was having these really ambiguous symptoms, really weird neurological stuff. Like my eyes would spin like crazy. I felt like this pull-in sensation behind my eyes all the time, like muscular pulling. It was really weird. It felt like I was going cross-eyed. And I skated through that season with this. I went to a Grand Prix. I went to the nationals with it, and I did fine, but I felt like crap the whole time. And I was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And so just a lot of weird symptoms, but yeah.
And I think what's great with them is, like, we have a plan, and what you're saying, like, having for health in general, and I've encountered this just from when I did practice herbalism and nutrition for a little bit with, like, clients, and there would be a pushback of, like, if you wanna take, like, ashwagandha or something, am I better next week? You're like, "Well,
Right.
no, you got it." This is a longer term kinda thing, and that's the same thing, and when a practitioner sits with you and talks to you about what's going on, it helps you get emotionally prepared for the journey, right? We're all gonna see what's gonna happen, but here's the plan, and here's how we're gonna deal with it, and if you are consistent, just like we're consistent with taking showers and then we're clean, you take consistent with whatever your protocol is, and then that works, that's how that works. So, I think that's really, really important.
I think I heard in one of your other episodes, you really highlighted consistency. And I do agree. I think consistency is more important than, obviously expecting if I take reishi tonight, am I going to be able to write a book tomorrow morning? Probably not. But if you're consistent with stuff, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously then you see the result. And I think the process is way more important than the outcome.
Yeah, because that's the lived experience, right? Like, that's when we show up and do if you're wondering maybe why you're not consistent with something, maybe it's a time to look at going, like, what is it that you're doing? Maybe what you're actually doing is, like, the way you're going about it isn't jiving with how you wanna show up, and so, going back to, like, your schedule and everything, like, with how you tackle the sides of your passions in your life, like, I'm sure there was times where you're like, "Okay, I could do it this way, and it's gonna be a grind, and it's gonna grind on my spirit," or why not, before I go down that path, maybe choose a different way to go about it that will actually be sustainable, and I think that when we talk about society does not encourage. I mean, like, society, the big S or whatever, doesn't
Big
encourage
S.
the big S doesn't encourage, like, sustainability in the way that in our lives, it's just like sensational. And again, this is why I'm doing this podcast is because this we're talking about like your actual, the little s sustainability in your life that is, in my very humble opinion, more meaningful and magical than just like the big dopamine hits of like the big things in our lives, right? Like, so when you go about creating a schedule for yourself of whatever it is that you want to tackle, being able to choose then what you really want to have in there. And you can't maybe have everything. You might not be able to have all of your preferred ways of going about it, right? But you have an opportunity then to say like, okay, I would like to be able to see clients from home and then I'll see them in person, like whatever it is that you're not like, I want to go to an office every day. I don't want to go to an office every day, but I'm
Right.
going to do it anyways because that's what I was told to do.
I think you have to find what works for you too. And I think, society and friends, family, everybody's going to have a different opinion on what could be best for you. And those systems might help, but ultimately we have to tailor our approach to what fits us best. And I think that's been hard for me, especially because I tend to lean on others for decisions. That's something I'm actively working on. I think a lot of the OCD clients I work with too, like we work on figuring out how to make decisions for themselves, right? But I think that is something that even I work on to this day. What do I need for me? Because I'll tend to want to lean into like, Chat GPT or other tools to help me figure out what is the perfect schedule. Well, it's only perfect if it works for me. And so kind of leaning into what's best for Danny, what's best for my schedule, my day to day. How can I incorporate all the things I like and still get the balance I need and still see clients and do all the things?
Yeah. And I think that, going to ChatGPT for that, how I've started doing that is I'll write all those things down, like what do I need and all of my requirements, and then say like, show me how that schedule might look in the
Right.
ChatGPT. Give me some like ways to conceptualize what I want out of that. Cause yeah, I think that question, I struggle with that question still. That was one of the questions that was like a turning point for me getting out of my old relationship that was I was just extremely codependent, everything was like I did not know how to advocate for myself. I didn't have that self-worth there, that piece. And I talked about it in a recent episode, but I will say it again because I love this lady. Her name's Lisa A. Romano, and she's like a codependent narcissistic recovery coach lady from Long Island. And she's just, has a bunch of videos. So this was like years ago, I would listen to her kind of nonstop when I was like leaving my relationship because I was trying to make sure that I kept like the right mindset because I kept being like, well, no, it's fine. Maybe I made a mistake. And I was like, no, I need to stay. I need to like commit to this. And one of her questions was, people like me in this scenario, how does it make you feel? How does this make you feel? And not that I love my family. I was the baby though. So typically I am the baby. So typically things are like, we're going here, we're doing that, da da da, to give an example. It wasn't like, how does that make you? Would you like to do those things? It's kind of like we're all doing this now, we're all doing that. And I think I just got into a habit of, at least that's part of it, of just being like, what does everyone else need so that I can make sure the temperature of the room is good, everyone's comfortable, because then I feel safe. And so
Right.
when I started
Versus
asking,
what do I need?
what do I need? How do I feel about this? And it is uncomfortable still because I'm like, but what if they're mad because I need this and they need that and they think I don't care
Yeah.
and blah, blah, blah. But, that's just
I mean,
part
I
of
think a lot of that can reflect our upbringing too. Of what kind of space were we raised in? Ultimately, sometimes the pendulum will swing the other way, like I mentioned earlier. If you're raised in an environment where you're co-regulating a lot or you're expected to take on other people's emotions, then maybe as an adult you really emphasize that. Or maybe it's the opposite. And then as an adult, you feel the need to take on people's emotions. So it's tricky. But going back really quickly to the Chat GPT,
Mm,
because it's such a thing nowadays, I think it's a great tool and we can use AI, we can use all the resources we have as tools, but when we try to lean into them as certainty and proof and evidence and have it specifically do things for us, that's where we're falling behind.
yeah. Yeah, I agree totally. Cause there was a meme that was something like, something about just how ChatGPT is always like, oh my God, you're totally right. Like, good job. This is amazing. And it's just like glowing you up. You're like, thank you. And you just said like
Right.
the most ridiculous thing. So definitely keeping that in mind that if you're like typing something in, like, I want to do this. What do you think about blend? I'm like, this is a great idea. And you're like,
I mean,
yes.
it's an echo chamber. It's such an echo chamber. And I mean, I have clients that'll use it in between sessions. And I think that's fine if they want extra support or help. But again, it's gonna highlight all everything as probably good and be, like I said, an echo chamber for you. And so you have to be careful with that.
Yeah.
Um, it's not a therapist, it's a language model. And so we have to,
Right. Keep
yeah,
that in mind.
use
Yeah.
caution, use trepidation with it.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely it's a really great tool. I don't know what, I hear a lot of people having a lot of different thoughts about like what that's gonna look like for us in the future and everything. And I think, again, going back to like my feeling and purpose in doing these kinds of things is that like this is as we can retain our humanity and celebrate our humanity as much as possible, whether it's through like arts and like what you do with skating. Dude, what you do with skating is so impressive. I really want to come watch in person. Like it's bananas. Like it's bananas. The videos that you post and just like tossing your partner in the air and then like her spins and then you getting in the air and doing your spins, like it's so like AI can't do that, like that's human. That's amazing. And I think that that is the thing if people are feeling like whatever about AI, like we just have to celebrate those things. Like I'm gonna play out live more because that's something I can do that's not
Right.
related to the computer or anything else. That's just coming from my body and that's it. That's my humanity that I want to just continue to put out there.
I think we have to remember too that we are creators and we created AI. It didn't create us,
Yeah.
so we can still embody the creation aspect,
Yes. Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
existential with it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think creativity, like I talk about creativity so much, I think, and not everybody feels like the need to paint or draw or sing or whatever, but I think creativity is a part of our just being and the way it's like a way of thinking is more how I think about it. It's a way of thinking. And so if you do something that's creative, it's helping your brain operate without constrictions a lot of times, right? Like just kind of letting you're channeling a bit or a lot, depending on how much you want to let that in. And you're able to use your brain differently, which will help you show up with the rest of your life differently. At least this is just my pure I don't have any degrees about this, but this is how I feel about it. This is what I feel like I've seen
Yeah.
evidentiary at least.
I
Yeah.
think I think creativity really fosters neuroplasticity and, like, the transfer of information between hemispheres of our brains, so I do think it's healing within itself from a neurobiological perspective.
Beautiful. I love it. There we go. There's a clinical way. I love it.
It's
That's
a
awesome.
clinical way of putting it. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
a psychiatrist, and I don't have degrees in neurobiology either, but yeah, it's cool stuff.
Yeah. It's important for people to play. I think play and creativity could be interchanged at times, right? Like
Mhm,
uh,
absolutely.
we need more playtime. And I think, again, doing something physical with your body, whatever it is that you want to do, and you don't have to be like amazing in it, but it's fun to get it. Like, I think jujitsu for me is basically I wanted a bunch of brothers that I could beat up, and now I have them. I could just
Right.
roughhouse all I want, and that's my playtime. So, what I know pickleball has become like huge. I have never done it, but it
Yep.
seems like everyone's having fun, so I think that's great. But
Right.
having that actual, like, playtime is really important, I think.
I'm
You
a
start
huge gamer, so, like, I
Oh,
that's my
yeah.
playtime, yeah, like,
Yeah.
my girlfriend and I have side by side PCs, we game all the time, and I think you can use gaming as creation too. I mean, some of the games I play are a bit more creative and you can have, create your character and, a bit more customization, so I think that's really cool.
I think it's so much fun. I'm not my husband definitely, like it's something I would love to be able to do with him. I don't think I can keep
Right,
up. I'm a good
right.
co-pilot, though. I can, like, hang out and be like, "Go there, do that, try that thing."
Sure, sure.
Help with, like, problem solving, but, yeah, I love that so much. Yeah. Wait, when did you start skating? And I wanna hear about your skating journey a little bit more.
I started when I was 5 or 5.5,
Uh,
and I think my mom took me to a birthday party, and it was at a rink, and, I ultimately just really liked it, and so it stuck with me, and we kind of immediately shifted to lessons. It's one of those weird butterfly effects because I start thinking, "What if I never went to that birthday party? Would I even be here? Like, what's going on?"
yeah, it's so crazy,
Um,
yeah.
but so I skated, and this was in Seattle, and so I skated in Seattle for a bit, as a fetus, basically. And then when I was 11, my dad wanted to move to Colorado. He worked for the FAA, and so he, I think, got a position from home and was able to work here. So we moved here, and it just so happened that the Olympic training site is here. So I started training at the World Arena with, these famous coaches, and I was doing singles at the time. My singles career wasn't super successful. I had some wins here and there, and I won the collegiate nationals at one point, which is like the collegiate track for figure skating. But as soon as I was around 18 or 19, I decided I kind of want to shift it to something different. I was thinking maybe of even retiring and just focusing on school, but then I was approached by a pair coach who said, "Hey, have you ever considered pairs? Like you're a good size. I think this would be a good fit for you. And so I started pairs, and shortly after had some really cool success. I went to nationals. We got on Team USA for the first time. I had my first international competition was in Russia. And so that was a really fun experience. And since then it's just been this crazy ride.
Wow, that's really cool. And so with the US team, how did that coincide with like the vertigo timeline? I'm trying to put the timeline together.
Yeah, I think let me think. I was probably 22, and so by that point I had competed at one Olympic trials and several international competitions, a Grand Prix, and yeah, this was like earlier in the season. I had this fall. I want to say it was in the summer, maybe in July, if I had to put a pin on it. And had this fall, had the vertigo symptoms, had the weird symptoms, but kept pushing because we had all these competitions lined up. And I was cleared from this concussion standpoint. Nobody was performing any negligence. It was just I was cleared, and everybody said, no, like you are good to go. I don't know what these symptoms are, but you're good to go. So I competed that year, finished out the year, but then had to take some time off to really figure it out. And that was in 2019 when I started going to Thrive,
Okay.
figuring that out. They put me in the functional movement training, and we did everything. And that's when I really gained the strength and mobility back, and I was able to get back on the ice. I think within a couple months of going to Thrive, and I had to start slow, but then I picked back up again, and my partner and I actually competed that year, and we had, gone to nationals again and gone to some international competitions. So that was really cool.
Yeah. And then so now you have a new partner.
Mhm.
And how does one get ready to try out for the Olympics? Like, how does that work? That sounds really cool.
Well, so we definitely won't try out for this Olympic cycle. That is like already predetermined and pretty much like that's it, right? So
Okay.
it would be the next cycle, the
Mhm.
2030, if we were to have a shot. And that's a huge goal of mine, and I think of hers too. And so ultimately, we've spent the majority of this year just getting to know each other, getting
Mhm.
our bodies to know each other, like training different lifts, training elements. No specific, we haven't competed yet. We're not competing until probably March or April just to kind of
Okay.
ease into it. But then it'll just be just a look at the next quad, the next 4 years, the next cycle, and we'll be gaining skills, hopefully competing internationally and getting recognized, and then trying to make a push for 2030. I mean, who knows? It's just one of those things. I mean, I'm not set on it, but I'm also set on it. It's
Yeah.
if it happens, that'd be really cool. That'd probably be the last time I would go for it though, because at that point I think I'd be aged out afterwards. But yeah.
So do you have to do a certain amount of competitions, like have to like win a certain amount for them to consider you, or like how does that work?
Yeah, it's a bit of a gray area. I mean, I don't know if anybody knows the real answer as far as the Olympic year. The nationals are called the Olympic trials. At the nationals, which is deemed the Olympic trials, if you're usually in the top 3 or 4, you probably have a good chance they'll send you. But I also think that they look at prior international competitions over the past couple of years, how you've done, your track record essentially, and they make the decision based off of everything there. I would say the first couple of years are less important in the quad cycle. It's
Mhm.
the last 2 years, maybe year gearing up to the Olympics where they really look at you. And so, yeah.
How will you incorporate skating, do you think, in the rest of your life?
Oh, that's a great question. I think a lot of people jump into coaching, and I'm not sure I'd wanna do that because I really like my career as a therapist, but I don't know. That's a great question, Greta. I guess I've never really thought about that. Maybe doing shows here and there, but who knows if I get fat and I'm
Oh,
still
stop.
able to do that.
Please.
Right? No, I'll
Um,
probably always wanna be athletic. I get too stir crazy if I'm not. But no, I mean, it's just one of those things that I don't know, I guess. I don't know
yeah.
what I'll do with skating after that. I'll probably attend some things here and there, but I don't know. It'll always be a part of me for sure.
Yeah. I mean, teaching and passing it along, it really is. Like, I love teaching jujitsu. Like, I don't compete that often. I am gonna try to compete this next year coming up. But I mean, I came from a self-defense background, so mainly my focus really more is just to like get that mindset into people of like, don't mess with me, But I'm not specifically jujitsu. I taught self-defense through Krav Maga. So jujitsu again is more like you can use it for self-defense, but it's not like a self-defense system on its own. But the teaching of it, like if it's something you love, I bet you would light up a lot, especially since you are a therapist, because you kind of end up with people in general. You're helping them, grow and see things differently. And you can like sprinkle in little like
Mhm.
of everything else that you have, in there.
Little bits of therapy in the
Yeah,
mix.
little
Yeah,
bits of
absolutely.
therapy and just like, I always think about the teachers that I've had. Most of my martial arts instructors that I had growing up, I mean, really tremendously shaped who I am.
Right.
And I always think about that, whether the person's a lot younger than me or close to my age, whatever, I know that having that, right, having somebody just like be a good person around you and model that is one of the greatest joys. And like, I don't know, then you're just like passing that joy along too.
Yeah, I think I probably will leave some space for coaching on the side. It probably wouldn't be my main focus,
No, no,
obviously,
no. Yeah.
but
Just
absolutely sharing that love and that joy for the sport and sprinkling in some therapy would be cool. And it's funny that you mentioned jujitsu because my skating coach, not to name drop, he'd probably assassinate me. He does jujitsu, so I know he
oh,
does it on the
nice.
side. Yeah, but he
Yeah.
does do that, and I do boxing on the side.
I
So I
love
do a
that.
little bit of contact stuff on the side, good for hand-eye coordination.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, boxing's definitely good for that, for sure. Like I said, just to be on that level of training is wild. It's not the norm. You have to know that, I think, right? It's not the norm. That's crazy.
Yeah, we've tapered it down a bit. Like, right now, we're only skating 3 days a week because my partner and I both have full-time jobs, and so we're doing what we can with our age and with our schedule, but it still serves as a really important balance, and it is demanding, but it's doable, and I think the balance works. I would much rather come home and see clients than just play video games or, do something a little bit more brain rotty. I think it's really important to have that intellectual, cerebral, and physical balance.
Well, especially with what you're doing, you have to be fully locked in. Like,
Mhm.
your brain can't be in 2 places at once, right? Like, you have to be completely
Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
I leave, like, when I'm at the rink, I put on my skating hat. Like, I leave whatever clients have told me. I try not to bring anything like that onto the ice. And then when I leave the rink, I leave what's at the rink, and I put on my therapist hat. And so it's really nice to have that juxtaposition.
And again, going back to the multi-passionate side of things, I think it's good for us. I think that, societally, at least I was brought up seeing the model of like, you do a job and then you go home to your family, whatever. It's like there wasn't a real encouragement to have, hobbies, of course, but not things where you can kind of shift the different parts of your brain like throughout the day. And like you said, with all the dopamine things, we have to have good discipline about it to make sure we're not just like chasing the dopamine dragon all day. Maybe because we did grow up with more stimulus where like I find life more interesting that way and enjoyable to be able to have different things that I care about. And same with jujitsu. Like when I go to jujitsu, I put my phone down and it's so
Right.
nice because I have to be on it all the time because I do a lot of social media marketing things and I'm self-employed, problem solving. My brain's like, and then what about this? And doing this all day. And then I put that down. And I can't think about that when there is a giant man trying to squash me. I have to only think about be like, get off
Right.
me, right? Like that's the
And I
only
think
thing going on.
I feel like a decade ago, we could watch a movie and not have to check our phone if we had phones, yeah, 10 years ago. But I feel like now I really have to be intentional about putting my phone down, not trying to check a notification. It's
Mm,
it's hard, it's so much harder, and that's because we have the dopamine dragon just flooding us on a
yeah.
daily basis.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think being intentional, having a routine, not being rigid with it, but having flexibility is really important in today's world.
Yeah, it's like having like a little structure, right? Like a little foundational structure. Like we do these things at this time, and then everything else in between you can kind of play with that as needed. Yeah, I know. We try at 9 o'clock because usually we'll get back from training and shower and eat, and then put our phones like somewhere else, and then just like hang out together. That's like the best way to do it. I really try, especially with my husband, like not to be. I'm really if I'm with whoever, like I don't wanna be like, "What, huh?" Like that with my phone 'cause I'm not fun. I'm like, I wouldn't wanna hang out with me. I can't really do both of those things at once.
No.
Either with you or I'm paying attention to something else, And yeah.
I try to delegate a specific times throughout the day to check my phone, and I'll sometimes just go through and clear out emails, clear out all my apps, but I'll do that in windows throughout the day, like, I'll have one before bed or in the morning or, but not to do that with every notification you get, right? Not
Yeah.
tuning in immediately, and that kinda goes back to what we're talking about of being able to sit with stuff and not immediately react, immediately do.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I turned off my notifications for most things. There's some in there, but definitely like some like Instagram or TikTok or something like that. I'm like, I can't. I'll
No,
see it when I see it, But yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. As we wrap up, I just wanted to know, I have little questions for you. What's
Yeah.
your personal definition of growth right now?
I like this concept right now of just being really intentional with my days and trying to kind of time max. I know it sounds really weird, but like being intentional and using every opportunity, using every moment to grow and lean into mindfulness. instead of it's so funny we're talking about the dopamine dragon, but like instead of doing stuff like that, instead of brain rotting, just being really intentional. How can I use this space? I mean, even just driving to the rink, I'll listen to a podcast or listen to an audiobook and like, how can I use this little window of time to just grow a little bit, to lean into something while also still finding time to do things for myself. And
Mhm.
so finding that balance and one thing I really like to emphasize, and this is something I talk about with my OCD clients, is thoughts versus thinking. There's a difference between thoughts versus thinking, right? Thoughts we can't control. They're kind of the automatic things that pop in our head. We can control what we do with that, where we place our energy afterwards. So that's the thinking part. And so I try to kind of, how much time am I spending ruminating or thinking about things that I could just set down and go back to the present with?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, yeah, we're especially since COVID, when I spent a lot of time by myself in my, like, previous life. I was just by myself a lot. So I was always in my head, like, and I would listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of audiobooks. It's why I, like, have so many. I'm like, "All right, all of these, resources or whatever." And I think a lot of people started spending time like that as well when COVID hit. So it was, like, a lot of time just sort of, like, in their head. So, yeah, so how would you suggest to somebody if they are wanting to have that practice of, like, letting, like, what's a good way to check in? Be like, "Am I thinking too much, or should I let these, like, thoughts, like, kinda pass?"
I tend to view it as if the thoughts or the thinking are, values based and we're really making meaning out of thinking. Because obviously, when you're in a space like that, you might need to be in your head to process and you might need to have time to think. But if you're finding that it's become a little bit more of an issue and it's taking up too much time and it's causing a rift for you and you feel like I want to be present, but I feel like I need to be thinking right now, then I would say, let's drop that thinking a little bit. Let's let those thoughts just pop in as automatic thoughts. Let's let them kind of scream at you in the background. Be okay with that. Go back to what you're doing, and then they'll quiet down naturally over time. The
Mm,
more you want to get something out of your head, though, the more you should actually kind of think about it more, right? And not try to push it away.
mm. It's so interesting. I find that so interesting that that's how we're wired. It's like, "No,
Mhm.
go towards it. Do it more."
Like, move towards it. Yeah, that's what I tell people because some people with OCD come with, like, thoughts or images stuck in their head, and they say, "How do I get this out?" And I'm like, "Well, you get it out by leaning into it, by going towards it, by letting it be there, and then it quiets down on its own."
Right, right. So interesting. That must be very rewarding to help people with this.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's a
Yeah.
process. Yeah.
Where if people wanna work with you, where can they find you?
So I work for the Compassion Collaborative. It's
I love that.
Yeah, and I do predominantly virtual, but I do take practically all insurance, and
Okay.
I also do EMDR, so a lot of fun things that we can do, not just obviously, I don't just do OCD work, but I incorporate, EMDR, CBT, ICBT, all sorts of different modalities.
Can you talk about EMDR real quick a little bit? Do you have time? Is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay, I'm
absolutely.
very interested in it,
Oh,
yeah.
I knew EMDR would come up. I love EMDR.
Yeah, yeah, I you said it earlier and I was like, "Ask," and then I forgot until right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Greta, have you done EMDR before?
I have wanted to do it. I have
Oh.
not done it, but I've heard a lot about it. I find it very interesting. Yeah, yeah, I would love to hear more.
So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's, I guess, gaining more popularity of late. It's not super new. It's not super old. I want to say, when was it developed? I guess I don't have that on the top of my head, but it's a really cool therapeutic modality where we use a form of bilateral stimulation. It started with eye movement. That's where you get the acronym eye movement, where you use bilateral stimulation with the eyes. So kind of stagnating the eyes back and forth to process trauma. And what bilateral stimulation does is it activates both hemispheres of the brain, and there's a bridge between both hemispheres called the corpus callosum. And when you do bilateral stimulation, it opens up. And so it allows the transfer of information. And so,
Mm,
like I said earlier, trauma often gets stored in the limbic brain and the amygdala, the fight or flight, the reptilian brain. And that part of the brain is not where we want trauma to be stored, right? And because that's where, when we have a trigger, when we have an external cue, our brain goes, oh my God, this is happening right now. We need to fight, flight, or freeze. And so, what we're doing with EMDR is we're having clients systematically go back into traumatic memories, or really any memory for that matter, and we're shifting the information. So the memories that lie in that amygdala, we're doing the bilateral stimulation, and then we're moving that information. We're literally rewiring your brain. We're working on neuroplasticity, and we're moving that trauma to the prefrontal cortex where it should be, where you can look back and go, that was a memory, that was shitty, that happened, but I'm not activated by it. And so typically with virtual clients, I do a form of bilateral stimulation called like the butterfly hug or tapping. Some clients in person like the buzzers. A lot of people these days are finding that they don't like eye movement as much, at least I'm seeing, because it's hard to focus on a memory or something traumatic and move your eyes back and forth, focus on a
Mhm.
dot or the light bar or whatever it may be. So a lot of clients prefer the bilateral with tapping or sitting with buzzers, closing their eyes, kind of meditating into it. I think it can be a really meditative process. But it's really a cool thing you'll see is, just after a few sessions of EMDR, clients will clear out certain memories and be able to look at them and go, yeah, that was shitty, but I'm not activated by it.
Very interesting. I love your explanation of it. Yeah, because I've heard of it. There was some meditations that I did that they did the tapping like that. But yeah, I didn't really like understand how it worked, and I like to know those things. I'm always like, tell me the
Well,
how.
that's like EMDR in a nutshell is just doing bilateral stimulation. I mean, you can incorporate that into your daily basis. That's why people find walking so therapeutic because walking is literally bilateral stimulation. That's actually how it was founded. When you're walking, you're literally using bilateral stimulation. And I believe the founder said that she noticed her eyes were moving back and forth as she was walking and processing some trauma. And she figured, that there's some weird correlation here. Started doing more in depth studies in it and really noticed the effect of bilateral stimulation. And obviously that's when they started the earlier conceptualization of the eye movement. And so it's really a cool practice. And I use it for a lot of people, not just with trauma, but we can even use it for OCD. We can have people perform exposures, like exposures with the bilateral stimulation, having them go into, an imagined fear and then not perform the compulsion. And that teaches their brain, hey, this is a good place to do this. So it can be used for a wide variety of things. It's really a cool study.
That's so cool. I love that with the walking because I'm like a huge. Obviously, I'd spend. That was kind of how I like just took care of myself. I would just go on nature walks and I would just observe nature and I would go on the same kind of. I would go to the same park and see how it changed from season to season and just observe things and listen to my intuition. And it was very healing. And I didn't know that that was a component of it. So that's really, really cool. I love
Probably
that
why
so
it feels good, right? Because it's kind of
yeah.
like doing EMDR. I mean, obviously, when we do EMDR in session, it's a bit more standardized. We have a protocol. We time it. We have a certain method of approaching it. But literally, you can incorporate bilateral stimulation into a lot of things. I mean, there's even YouTube videos or audio files that have bilateral stimulation that'll have sound go from one ear to the other. It's
Mhm.
bilateral, and so sometimes I'll even have that on in the background when I'm working with clients virtually, just really quiet. So I'm getting a little bit of regulation at the same time. So you could incorporate that a lot of ways into your lifestyle.
I love that thinking of it that you can incorporate it. Like you said, it's not gonna maybe, like, take the place of actually, like, seeing you or somebody like you to actually really, have, like, a set intention for something. But the more that we understand about the brain in that way and, like, just that that is a fact of what's happening and how to, like, actually incorporate that in to kind of regulate ourselves, especially in a world that's trying to assault us with all kinds of energies and information and all of that. So,
Mm.
that's like a little place to, like, have the self-care and nurturing and, without making it be a whole day thing. I like little practices that we can, like, pop into our lives, and that's a beautiful one. I love that.
It's a great place to also just sit like you're talking about sitting with it. I mean, you can sit with your emotions, you can sit with whatever's kind of popping in your head and be a bit meditative with EMDR. I mean, you can even just be at home and kind of tap your shoulders bilaterally and sit with your emotions. That's a great place to do it. I mean, obviously it's good to do it raw too and just sit with emotions without bilateral stimulation, but it's also a good practice to try that. You might notice a difference.
Yeah, that's so cool. Okay, so wait, the compassion what was it the name of your
It's the Compassion Collaborative.
Compassion Collaborative. I love that. Okay, so and you're on their, like, website and everything?
Yeah, I'm on their website, and if you go kind of like under therapists on their website and,
Okay.
yeah,
I'll link you
absolutely.
on here. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for this. This has been so fascinating and wonderful, and I'm really happy you wanted to come on and that it all worked out.
Thank you for having me, Greta. I appreciate you, and I
Yeah.
love hearing your story too.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, you're an amazing listener. Obviously, I see you're you've done well.
I've been trained well.
You've been your training has served you. I appreciate
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to share?
No, I don't think so. I think that covers it.